will be Scott Murdock, who will be presenting on autonomy development, support, and future orientation of adolescent mothers. And Scott's mentor is Professor Karina from the Department of Psychology.
Good morning. Can everyone hear me? All right. Good morning. My name is Scott Murdock, and I will be presenting a paper titled Autonomy Development, Support, and Future Orientation Among Adolescent Mothers. This research was conducted alongside Kelly Shepard and my faculty mentor, Dr. Carissa Chia. To give you a brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about today, I'll give you some background on the areas of adolescent parenthood and autonomy development and support. I'll detail the present study and what we aim to find, a brief discussion of our method, and I'll talk about the results and potential implications. The United States has the highest adolescent birth rate of all westernized countries. Furthermore, after declining for several years, rates have been on the increase over the past decade. And at least 40,000 moms leave school 40,000 adolescents leave school each year after becoming pregnant, which eliminates one potentially supportive environment for these adolescents. And talking a bit about autonomy, autonomy is a universal concept which is used across a variety of disciplines, the literal definition of which is regulation of self. Now, some common operational definitions for the field of psychology include separation from parents, opposition to external pressures, and the establishment of an individual concept of independence. Now, that individual concept is subjective, so that autonomy development is often dependent upon support that's received, which is the next area that I want to talk about. And we're going to be talking about three areas of support. The first is support for autonomy, which relates to the assistance provided for establishing self-regulatory behavior such as decision-making. Now, for true autonomy to occur, connections to others are not simply severed. There needs to be a negotiation that takes place. And that negotiation takes place between supportive guidance for self-governed behavior and close, stable relationships that allow that negotiation to occur. Now, that relationship with others is another support system called relatedness, a lack of which can diminish or eliminate the supportive guidance that's needed for autonomy development. Now, it should be noted that relatedness varies across cultures and contexts. Previous research has shown that African American and Hispanic samples are higher in relatedness than their counterparts with European backgrounds. Now, this specifically refers to parents, and it's also important for this particular study because this study has used a predominantly African American sample. The final support is support for competence. Adolescent mothers tend to receive fewer opportunities than their non-parenting counterparts, which includes education and the development of life skills. However, competent support can be achieved from other sources, including family support, specifically the adolescent mother's own mother, and their own perceived self-efficacy, which is a belief in their own abilities, which can affect their motivation and commitment. Now, with adequate support, adolescent mothers face more favorable outcomes, which is the next area that I want to talk about a little bit about, which is future orientation. Now, both educational and occupational attainment issues can create challenges for adolescent mothers to reach future aspirations, including lower earning potentials. However, these career aspirations are theorized to be focused on development through age-specific processes, including autonomy development, which leads us to the present study here today. And the aim for this study is to determine the relation between autonomy development and future orientation and future career orientation at differing levels and types of support. Specifically, we look to find a curvilinear relation between autonomy development and future career orientation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what I mean by curvilinear relation in a little bit. And this relation will be moderated, we believe, by 3 different types of support, including autonomy support, relatedness support, and competence support. A little bit about our methods. We had 106 first-time adolescent mothers with an average age of 17.3 years. So predominantly African-American sample, 2/3 of which were presently in school at the time of the study, 2/3 of the entire sample. And participants were recruited from various organizations throughout Baltimore City. For our measures, we had 4 measures. The family description measure was used for demographics. We used the Erickson Psychosocial Stage Inventory to measure stages of development, and we focused on the autonomy development subscale for this particular study. My future measure was used to measure how often participants think about their future career. And the autonomy, competence, and relatedness support scale was used to measure perceived levels of support. To outline the actual method we used to conduct this study, trained undergraduate research assistants obtained consent forms from the participants and administered questionnaires in the participants' homes. In the case of minors, consent was also obtained from the parents of those participants. Participants were compensated $20 for their time, and confidentiality was ensured by keeping data and consent forms separate and locked. Now first I want to talk about our result. For getting into our results, I want to talk about the relation between autonomy and future orientation. Is that the bottom of the video? Yes, okay. Now as you can see, this line is curved. However, it's not a significant curve, so that the relation between autonomy development and future orientation is best described as a linear relation. So basically what this means is that as autonomy development increases, we see that future orientation scores also increase. Now this relation is moderated by the various levels and types, various types and levels of support that I previously mentioned, and we're going to go into those in the next 3 graphs. Go ahead. Sorry. Before I get into the next 3 graphs, I want to indicate something about these 3 lines here, because these lines are going to repeat in the next 3 graphs. This blue line here represents a mean level of support. This brown line represents low levels of that support. And this green line represents high levels of support. Now the support will change, but those 3 lines are going to be common throughout the next 3 slides. So the first support system that we're going to look at is support for autonomy. Now at low levels of support, this brown line here, and low levels of autonomy development, we see the future orientation scores are actually higher. And at high levels of support for autonomy and low levels of autonomy development, we see that future orientation scores are lower. However, as autonomy development increases, we see that the lines begin to converge so that the support levels all begin to approach the mean. Next, we're looking at support for relatedness. Again, at low levels of support for relatedness and low levels of autonomy development, we see that future orientation scores are higher. At high levels of support for relatedness and low levels of autonomy development, future orientation scores are lower. And again, as autonomy development increases, we see that future orientation scores begin to approach the mean again. Support for connectedness, or for competence, we have the low levels of support for competence and low levels of autonomy development. Having higher future orientation scores, high levels of support for competence, and low autonomy development, having lower future orientation scores, and again, the levels of support begin to approach the mean for future orientation. Taking a look at our results, we found that autonomy development has a linear relation with future orientation, and that relation is moderated by various types and levels of support. At low levels of support and autonomy development, we infer that adolescent mothers may lack independence, role models, and emphasis on education that would be necessary to support the achievement of the high goals that they have for themselves, and so that the future orientation scores may be more idealistic. At high levels of support and low levels of autonomy development, there's a combination of high support for something that the mothers don't have, and so that can be slightly overwhelming, but as support increases, as autonomy development increases, we see that support is, again, approaching the mean, so that mothers are a little bit more realistic with their report of their future orientation as support increases. For future studies, a larger sample size should be used as more representative of the national population. It should assess the impact of specific support sources such as parents, peers, and partners. And we should also include other depth methods of data, including qualitative data to provide direct feedback, longitudinal to assess changes in development support and reported future orientation, and observational data can view those levels of support in future outcomes. To acknowledge the participants of this study, the other individuals who helped us to recruit these individuals and organizations. I also want to say thank you to the Project Advanced Research team who helped collect data, and the team who helped me with learning all of the data information. Kelly Shepard for helping me with this paper, and my mentor, Dr. Chia, who I would need a whole another 15 minutes to thank for all of her gifts and blessings. And we have some questions with that.
Yes.
Any questions?
Time for any questions?
I was just wondering, these teenage mothers, did any of them have a father involved?
With the father of the child, you mean?
Yeah.
Yes. For this particular study, we did not look at the father data. We do, I believe that the number, Kelly, I'm not sure if you know it off the top of your head, with the number of 70% are in relationship with the fathers currently.
Yes.
So I got that there's a positive correlation between autonomy and competence support and future orientation, but I didn't get what was the implications of a high level of future orientation or a low level of future orientation.
Well, that can actually be slightly misleading because, like I said, with the future orientation scores being higher in certain situations, you have to remember also that these are self-report measures, so that these are the moms reporting how often they think about their own future career, how often they look at their future aspirations. So that being said, I believe that to answer your question, higher scores may not necessarily mean that these moms are looking at higher or looking at greater, like they want to be a doctor as opposed to wanting to be anything else or some perceived as lower perception. I think to answer your question, perhaps I would say that these perceived levels are maybe either more realistic or idealistic depending on their level of support and depending on their own autonomy development. With lower levels of autonomy development, they may be receiving, for example, for competence, as you asked, at low levels of autonomy development, if they're receiving low levels of support for competence, they're not necessarily as independent, they're not necessarily getting the information or education that they need to achieve certain goals. So they may report they think about their future career a lot, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, that's what they're actively pursuing these things. So what they're doing is they're reporting that they're thinking about their future aspirations as kind of maybe more idealistic points of view, whereas when you have high levels of support, you're getting the education, you're getting the knowledge to reach these future aspirations. You may more look at the reality of the situation and say, okay, I have some challenges that I need to deal with in the present so that I can reach the future. So that those future aspirations and the thoughts around them may be more current and maybe more realistic than those that have lower levels of support for competence. Did that answer your question?
Pretty much, I think so. Thank you.
Sorry.
I'm sorry we have to cut the questions off.